Hello everyone, I'm David Vaucher. This is Return on Racing. Return on Racing is powered by Vaucher Analytics, which helps race teams and drivers drive efficiencies off track so they can fuel success on track. Return on Racing is also brought to you by the Motorsport Sponsorship Accelerator, the most cutting edge resource out there to learn how to find, maintain, and grow long-term sponsorship relationships. If you're interested in finding out more, please visit the Vaucher Analytics website at www.vaucheranalytics.com and use the navigation links at the top right hand of the screen. Well, as has been the theme this week, this is not an episode I intended to record, but it has been absolutely jam-packed with crazy news. First, there was the rumor of Alex Palou potentially joining Max Verstappen in the second Red Bull seat. Now, that rumor seems to have been shot down. It's died down a little bit, but I think the analysis I posted is still quite provocative. And if you want to check it out, that'll be under the Insights section of Vaucher Analytics, or it'll be about 2 podcast episodes back. Next, we had the announcement of the 2 Cadillac drivers. That was really excellent, and I'm looking forward to seeing some great things from Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez next season. And then just today, news out of the sim racing world, but really perhaps the racing world, when iRacing and Cosworth announced a really historic partnership which would allow iRacing users to have access to Cosworth's professional suite of Toolbox telemetry tools. And what I want to do is talk about this not just from a news announcement point of view, but what this actually means for the greater world of iRacing, if you can call it that, and what it means for real life racing, because I think this is going to be a seminal moment in that crossover that everyone's always talking about, which is sim racing to real world racing. I want to talk about going from game to operating system and why the Cosworth iRacing partnership could redefine motorsport by 2030. So today, on August 28th, 2025, iRacing announced a landmark partnership with Cosworth, the legendary engineering firm producing everything from engines to steering wheels to, pertinently for this announcement, software. At first glance, this might sound like a nice upgrade for sim racers who want to feel a little bit closer to the action. Cosworth Pi Toolbox, highly regarded in professional race telemetry, will be made available to all iRacing users. Now, Cosworth is, of course, a legend in racing, but it's also no stranger to the sim racing space, or at least the very high-end sim racing space, having already released consumer versions of some of their highly recognizable real-life steering wheels. And I think if I ever hit the lottery, I will be building my upgraded sim rig around Cosworth products. But this news is far bigger than just new features for a PC sim. Here's a quote from the official announcement. Quote, "The launch of the collaboration aligns with iRacing's wider ambitions, including the expansion into console gaming through upcoming iRacing Studios titles like iRacing Arcade and the introduction of officially licensed NASCAR and IndyCar games." End quote. Now, to me, this is underselling what the platform's actual ambitions appear to be, given this potential announcement. So here is a quote from Cosworth in this same press release, which more closely reflects what appears to be going on here. And again, this is my hypothesis. Quote, "This is more than just a partnership, it's a performance ecosystem," end quote. And this is from Tom Brown, head of product and solutions at Cosworth. My hypothesis, what I'm proposing to you, is that what we are really witnessing is iRacing's shift from being just a game to positioning itself as the operating system of motorsport. And that move opens up entirely new business models in education, industry, sponsorship, and even data monetization. This is not about making sim racing more realistic, or at least that shouldn't be the ultimate goal. In other words, maybe that will happen, but I don't think that's what really is at stake here. This is about turning iRacing into a platform so essential that engineers, drivers, teams, universities, and sponsors eventually all have to plug into it. So let's talk about why the iRacing partnership with Cosworth matters so much in a little bit more detail. Cosworth's Pi Toolbox is not a casual add-on. It's the same platform used by teams in professional motorsport series to analyze car performance, compare driver inputs, and of course, make setup decisions. Maybe some engineer played around with it in their spare time, but this was and is not consumer tech, not in any sort of real-world interpretation of that term. By integrating this directly into iRacing, though, this level of analysis is suddenly democratized, at least in its availability, if not its capability, and I'll get to that in a moment. Aspiring engineers, amateur sim racers, and university students now have access to tools once reserved for professionals. And more importantly, Cosworth introduces itself to consumers, and iRacing is now positioned not just as a consumer subscription product, but as a professional grade environment for motorsport workflows. And this is really at the heart of what I'm seeing as a strategic shift from game to industry tool. Up until now, iRacing has competed in the same category as Assetto Corsa or Automobilista, immersive, high-fidelity sims for hardcore players. Yes, it was differentiated by, and continues to be differentiated by, its high cost and industry-leading lobbies. But even if sim racing grows further, those same factors could be intimidating for a lot of potential players, putting the brakes on iRacing's larger growth potential. In other words, as games like Le Mans Ultimate improve, as games like Assetto Corsa Evo improve, as all these other sim racing games come down the pipeline, that's competition that iRacing may lose to. So even as sim racing grows, iRacing may not be the first choice for some of these players coming in. And so there's got to be another way for iRacing to grow. The Cosworth deal signals a new trajectory. iRacing isn't just entertainment anymore, it's becoming infrastructure, and the difference is massive. A game monetizes through subscriptions, DLC, and esports. An industry tool monetizes through B2B licensing, education programs, OEM partnerships, and professional workflows. And that shift is what makes this partnership the beginning of something that can be potentially very lucrative. If iRacing successfully becomes the default environment for motorsport data and simulation, it stops competing with other games, and it starts being considered along with something like MATLAB, and that is a much larger market. So now let's talk about this tangibly and explore 5 angles that show where the iRacing partnership with Cosworth could go. Where exactly could this lead? Well, let's start illustrating that with 5 complementary angles that together form the roadmap for iRacing's evolution from sim to operating system. The first one that immediately came to mind as I was thinking about the potential ramifications of this partnership are as an edtech platform. I've already mentioned it, but this could be the MATLAB of motorsport, or if you don't want to be that specific, something that is part of an engineer's curriculum as MATLAB is. It certainly was part of mine. If you're an aspiring engineer in the next few years, perhaps you'll have no choice but to have a project portfolio inside iRacing. The same way aerospace students can't avoid MATLAB, or mechanical engineers can't avoid SolidWorks. That was another one I had to work with, as I'm sure you have if you went down the same path I did. Motorsport students will perhaps need to show they can analyze data, build setups, and run workflows, and why not in the iRacing Cosworth environment? To bring this back to the current paradigm, in the same way that aspiring drivers can build their profile on iRacing and prove their competency on track, it's entirely feasible that aspiring engineers will also have to build their technical credentials on the same platform. And that opens up a massive B2B market. Universities could license iRacing seats as part of their motorsport engineering curriculum. It's wild, I know, but certainly plausible if we take this down a logical path. Coursework could require students to submit projects analyzing iRacing telemetry in the same way they currently analyze vehicle dynamics and lab simulations. In other words, iRacing stops being a hobby and it becomes part of formal education. As a side benefit, so much of motorsport success comes down to communication between the various teams. Can you imagine how that could improve if an early career driver and engineer team paired up early? Presuming teams are willing to hire them as a set, their chemistry acquired over years of working together could be a decisive competitive advantage. The next potential avenue for this, number 2, is as an industry workflow platform. In other words, motorsports Microsoft Teams. Right now, motorsport teams likely work in the same disparate environments as their corporate counterparts. What happens if and when iRacing centralizes all of that into one environment? One of the innovations of the Motorsport Sponsorship Accelerator is that it proposes using iRacing as a meeting place to share ideas and provide support in a driver's sponsorship search. So that's me improvising, but what happens when that functionality actually gets codified into the platform? Drivers and engineers can run practice sessions, analyze telemetry live, share setups, and debrief in the same space, and of course, share files. Cosworth Pi Toolbox is the first app, and I think you can call it that, on the iRacing platform, but conceivably, more could follow. Tire models, aero simulators, even sponsored dashboards could all live inside iRacing. And to me, that's not a game. That's an operating system for motorsport. And once teams build their workflows on it, the switching costs are enormous, and that goes for both iRacing and Cosworth. If in fact iRacing and with it Pi Toolbox become the standard for engineering students, what will they want to work with when they join the workforce? And as they progress in their career, what will they continue to favor? So for iRacing, it's great because they build credibility in the consumer space, or rather in the professional space. And on the professional side, Cosworth builds credibility with consumers, and all of that feeds all the way down the training chain and works its way up to really become a very sticky standard for the industry. Number 3 is data as currency, monetizing the world's largest telemetry pool. Every iRacing session will now produce pro-grade telemetry data. You multiply that across hundreds of thousands of users, and you have a gigantic data set off of which to monetize the ecosystem even further. That data, of course, is valuable. OEMs could study it for product development. Tire companies could assess reactions to a new tire model. Analytics firms could use it to just generally gain data to have more targeting and more targeted advertising. Broadcasters could overlay it for fan engagement. Think of what Strava did for running and cycling. The activity itself became the products. Well, iRacing could do the same for motorsport. This takes us to the fourth avenue, credentialing and building the LinkedIn of motorsport. So this is tying a little bit back to iRacing as an edtech platform. But think about this. If Pi Toolbox analysis becomes standard in sim racing, iRacing could lead the way further by offering certification pathways, complete analysis modules, hit performance benchmarks, and you earn badges that prove competence as a driver or engineer. That could evolve into partnerships with series, teams, or accreditation bodies. For instance, a level 1 iRacing data analyst could carry weight like a CFA or AWS certification today. Incredible as it may sound, down the road in the not so distant future, this could actually become career capital. Imagine job postings saying, iRacing telemetry analysis proficiency required. I know it sounds crazy, but it's a logical extension of what this partnership sets in motion. Number 5, the final avenue down which this could go, but this is only 5 out of potentially many if this actually turns into a platform like I think it will. So this is iRacing as a B2B sponsorship ecosystem going well beyond the liveries that we're used to. Sponsorship in sim racing has mostly meant putting a logo on a car. Maybe you've got a billboard in an in-game environment, and maybe that gets taken a little further if we're talking esports in real life. With Cosworth on board, iRacing can sell much deeper activations. Again, a tire manufacturer could sponsor a simulation layer that teaches engineers about degradation. A fuel company could integrate its models into endurance races, or an OEM could run branded data challenges inside iRacing Arcade or iRacing Pro. This is where iRacing stops being a consumer subscription and starts being a sponsorship activation platform in ways that we may not even imagine today. And because the ecosystem touches both casual players and professionals, the reach is unmatched. And also, I would say, the potential applications. It's really limited only by creativity. Now, I've mentioned a little bit platform and in the iPhone analogy, but I want to really drive home the point that the iPhone analogy works. Think of iRacing as the iPhone circa 2007. Before apps, it was a nice device. After apps, it became the platform that people lived inside. Your life now is probably governed by many apps. And to me, Cosworth Pi Toolbox is the first app. Once the precedent is set, others will follow. I've mentioned aero models, tire simulators, setup libraries, even sponsored dashboards, all could live natively and be enabled by the iRacing environment. And at that point, iRacing isn't just a sim, it's the default platform where motorsport happens. Drivers, engineers, sponsors, and fans all working inside the same ecosystem. And to me, the announcement between iRacing and Cosworth is the first step. If we talk about this strategically in terms of iRacing's positioning relative to other sims, this is a defensive moat. What makes this move especially smart is that it builds a moat no competitor can easily cross. ACC and Le Mans Ultimate may offer great realism, but they can't claim to be the professional standard used by both IndyCar and WEC teams for real-world workflows, even if, of course, drivers may train on those. By positioning itself as infrastructure, iRacing is no longer competing with other games. And I know I may have annoyed a lot of sim racing fans by calling iRacing a game. I think today is where that distinction can actually be made. You have game and sim and platform. And after today, iRacing is competing with industry standards, and that's a much stickier market. But can we really call it competing if they're the first to do what so many others have talked about for so long, which is bridging the sim and real racing worlds? So let's talk about implications for motorsport series now. For racing series, this evolution changes the game. Partnering with iRacing no longer means just licensing cars and tracks. It means embedding the series identity into the workflows of the next generation of engineers and drivers. IndyCar is already on board with a dedicated console title coming in 2026. That was another piece of very large news that happened this week. And it seems to me like a huge missed opportunity not to include the new telemetry functionality. And how could they, when IndyCar comes up several times in the partnership of the announcement as an actual user of Cosworth software? NASCAR is following with its 2025 release. Could they also be on board with this? I would expect other series to join because the risk of being absent from the platform grows with every new app that comes online. Bottom line, if you're not in iRacing, you may not be in the motorsport consciousness of the next generation. So in the title of this recording, I mentioned 2030. So let's talk about the road to 2030. Where does this all go? Well, by the beginning of the next decade, it's entirely plausible that iRacing will be the educational standard in motorsport engineering programs, the workflow hub for professional teams, from grassroots to the WEC and other top flight categories. It could also be the largest telemetry dataset in motorsport history, monetized across industries. It could also be the credentialing platform for aspiring engineers and drivers. And from a commercial point of view, or a more commercial point of view, it could be the B2B sponsorship layer where technical partners engage fans and professionals simultaneously. And again, that is not a game. That is an operating system and an industry platform. So, final word, at least for now, on the iRacing partnership with Cosworth. To me, this partnership will be remembered as the moment sim racing actually crossed the line into real-world motorsport infrastructure. What began as entertainment over a decade ago is now becoming a professional tool, an educational platform, a data marketplace, and a sponsorship engine. In short, iRacing is no longer just where people play motorsport. It's where motorsport lives. I hope you enjoyed this special episode of Return on Racing. If you found it interesting, I encourage you to tune in for future episodes, but I also ask that you consider signing up for the Return on Racing newsletter. This newsletter delivers weekly insights to your inbox in less than 500 words. So the idea is to give you actionable thoughts that you can apply directly to your day-to-day motorsport operations. If you're interested in this, please navigate to the Voce Analytics website. The sign-up box will be right there on the front page, or alternatively, I'll post the sign-up link directly in the show notes for this episode. As always, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me on this episode of Return on Racing, and I very much look forward to speaking with you on future episodes.